Hey everyone, Balfix here, back with another Eternal Return video. Today's video is going to be a bit of a departure from the past few character lists I've done, purely because instead of character power, I'm going to be talking about characters that I find very fun. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of overlap because a lot of characters are very powerful and also very fun in my opinion, so keep that in mind if you recognize a few names. Adina. So, to start the list off, we'll be starting with Nicky, who is a mage bruiser character who really functions well as an off-tank. She is not the best tank at the moment purely because a lot of other characters have much better defensive mitigation than Nicky. If you guys don't know, Nicky's W acts as a guard/parry ability, which negates a lot of incoming damage for a brief moment and then also CC immunes that incoming skill if there is any CC attached to it, and it gives you an empowerment on your E, which is like this big punch. If you don't have it empowered, it's just a slow, but if it is empowered, it's a pretty good stun. So she's very good in that supportive aspect if you are parrying a lot. So it's really fun to play her again because it's very nice to mind game people with your parry. A lot of people will be aware that you're trying to parry stuff and they'll try and hold abilities, and that's when you like don't bother parrying, or maybe you try and parry into an auto attack when they least expect it to get empowered abilities. It's really fun to play. I think it's a little easier to play her in that regard because of squads. It's a lot easier to get killed obviously because you might get focused, but it's a lot easier to parry. So just play her a lot more slowly than you want to. Try parrying away from enemies unless you're really trying to get a stun on somebody important. So the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of characters in the game that are main tanks like Lennox and Estelle have much better damage mitigation than Nicky does. There's a recent hotfix that dropped Estelle's shield from 70% to 50% damage reduced. And if you guys didn't know, Nicky's W actually scales from 50% to 70% as you level it. So you can imagine how much weaker Nicky was as a tank when Estelle's E, which lasts unironically 10 times longer than Nicky's parry, was also way stronger than Nicky's parry for a lot longer of the game. So I think now Estelle has been nerfed a lot, but it still doesn't change the fact that Estelle's main form of damage mitigation is a lot longer and a lot more efficient. Same thing with Lennox with her passive, her shield's up very often, and it can absorb a lot more than like a half-hearted parry from a Nicky player. Obviously, if you have a really good Nicky parry, for example, like you parry like an insane ultimate which would have killed you from 100 to 0, you'll obviously parry more than what a Lennox shield would have given you. But again, just to be aware, it is a lot worse of a damage mitigation skill than a lot of characters have, so you can't really take an upfront fight with Nicky. You'll just die very quickly the moment your parry is down. Moving on to the next character, we're going to be talking about Barbara. You guys might have been able to guess that I really enjoy Barbara because a lot of my gameplay videos have been about her recently. I would say that the main way I'm playing Barbara, and the reason why I find her fun, is because of the RQ combo, which ends up turning into her much more of a combo character as opposed to like a mindless RW spammer. It is a bit difficult to learn the RQ combo because you have to like go Q, E, W, R, Q, E, W, and then press bat skill sometime in there and understand the positioning and how to burst people properly. But it's very rewarding. You guys have seen me one-shot people very often, I'm sure, in my videos. And the more I learn the character, the more interesting it is to, continue one-shotting people and learning new ways to one-shot people or play fights to allow myself to maybe not one-shot somebody but get more damage on more relevant targets in the middle of a fight. So she's a character who's been historically unpopular, which is a shame because she is very fun to play. I think the RW history of her is the reason why she isn't as popular as she should be. So if you give her a try, I do recommend learning how to do the RQ combo because again, it is very, very rewarding to learn her. I think a lot of people actually consider her very weak because she isn't played that often, but again, even when she was super strong, she was criminally underplayed. So if you learn her, you kind of have the buffer of nobody plays her, so you're playing a character who is probably very good, but since nobody plays her, no one doesn't have the stats to nerf her, and so it just ends up being the scenario where like, if you play League of Legends like Old Poppy, where the character was super strong, but since nobody played her, they just never nerfed her. So we'll see what they do with Barbara. Personally, I recommend playing her. She is, again, very fun to play. One-shotting people is always a joy, and I will never get sick of that until they nerf it, obviously. The next character I really enjoy is Adriana. If you guys have been on Eternal Return YouTube for a while, you'll know Adritoma. And Adritoma is a pretty experienced Adriana player. I don't know about anymore. I've seen him more on Priya than I have seen him on Adriana as of late. But he was somebody that really popularized Adriana back in the day, I think like a year and a half ago. So a lot of respect to him for that. But all that aside, Adriana is a character who really rewards tracking very properly. Obviously, tracking in the sense of MOBAs means less of like the accurate mouse accuracy like you would in FPS games, but more of like your character relative to your opponent's character. So a lot of Adriana's damage is within her Q, so you have to understand how to move your character properly with your Q, like linearly. But also there is the W, which is the oil slick, and her ultimate, which also rewards you for predicting your opponents and inconveniencing them as much as possible as they try and run towards you or away from you. And the reason why that's really nice and fun is because, again, it's more of like a little mind game where you're predicting where your opponent wants to go. It's really fun to just like trying to track people with your Q, because sometimes you can press the S key and they'll try and juke, but instead of actually juking, they'll sit in your flamethrower more because you pressed S and they're like wandering around the middle of your flamethrower. And it's very fun, you know, ulting people down with her Molotovs and tracking them with her W, just because you can do a lot of extra damage just by making sure they're inside your W trail. They changed her a lot since I played her a ton. They made her oil trail or her passive deal a lot less damage if they stay in it, so there's less value in the tracking. But you can't really deny the fact that keeping people inside a prolonged dot field isn't valuable, especially with Adriana's defense reduction on her passive. So even though they made her a little bit easier to play, it's still very rewarding to play her properly because you still get so much value out of playing her properly. I will say that in terms of complexity and skills and combos, she is much lower than Nicky and Barbara, but in my opinion, she more than makes up for it in the fact that you have to be so mechanically good with her, and your decision making has to be very good with her, because if it isn't, you won't have as much impact as you should have, because you'll be missing your Qs, missing your ults, missing your Ws, and not probably fighting properly with her. So 10 out of 10 character mechanically. Huni, who was an old god basically of the game, used to spam her a lot, and he was very inspiring. Unfortunately, don't think he's come back to the game with the squad's release, but if you guys ever find his channel, he was very, very popular back in the day, and it's still very fun going back to those videos and watching him just destroy everyone as Adriana in solos. Number 4, this girl doesn't really require an introduction. It's going to be Adina, so I'll keep the section short. Adina is a character that requires a lot of like brain power when it comes to Bejeweled matching with her passive, but she does a lot of damage. A lot of people don't like her because she does so much damage and does everything, but if you play her, you'll understand just why she's so much fun. She's a character that's kind of like very fun for the player, but very unfun to play against because people don't really want to try and understand what she does, which is kind of a shame, but I do understand it. There's a lot going on, and I think people expect more simplicity in MOBAs instead of having to, you know, again, play Bejeweled in the middle of the game. But yeah, I have an Adina guide already, so if you want to watch that for everything else, then please do. But if you guys want to learn a more brainy character that also rewards positioning very well, Adina might be your gal, and she is always very strong. No one has never made her weak. And a character that's always been in my heart, a character that I've always been very terrible at, but is again very fun because he has a lot of combos and he's just very fun to play in my opinion, is going to be Alex. Alex has changed a lot since his heyday where he was a burst amp character. Now he's more back to where he was at release, where you really just sit in one form and auto people to death. But it doesn't change the fact that Alex is very smooth to play, especially with the weapon swamp being instant since a long time ago. This means that Alex is a character who can smoothly go between one weapon to another, which opens up a lot of different ways to play the game. He has a lot of different styles because, again, he is able to, you know, sit in pistol and kind of play the poke game, and then come to auto attacks. He can play Shuriken, which is a lot more burst oriented with his Shuriken weapon skill. He can play Tonfa, which is like a juke ability with the Tonfa weapon skill. He can play two-hand, which is a lot more damage with his auto attacks. And these are all things you can choose to do in the middle of a game, which is very fun on the decision making because, again, you have to make those decisions in the middle of the game, and it's very fun playing around with those combos and those, you know, different micro decisions within a game itself. And it always feels really good to play well on Alex, even when you are just sticking to like one or two weapons, because it's very satisfying. His sound effects are one of the best in the game, like his pistol auto sound, absolutely amazing. And it's always very fun taunting people and running them down as well. So I think he's a little bit different in the regard that, again, there's not really a set combo for him to play, and he is more of an auto attacker than a burst combo mage at the moment. But I do think if you want to play a character who just like aesthetically very pleasing, auto is very good, sound effects very good, and in general has a very dedicated player base, like if you need to find an Alex teacher, it is very easy to find an Alex teacher or find gameplay. That's how fun he is, because you can't really have mains spam a character if they're not fun, right? So yeah. those would be my 5 characters for you to play. Obviously, you don't have to be dedicated to those characters, but you know, just my recommendation if you're trying to find a character to main. I hope this video was helpful if you're kind of lost in the sauce, and if you don't like it, just let me know and I'll try and adjust it for next time. I hope you guys all have a good night or day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.